Hello, and welcome to Cosmic Sleep. We tell relaxing sleep stories for adults to help you unwind and get ready for a deep sleep. Tonight's bedtime story is The Abandoned Astronaut, a journey through the vast unknown where survival hangs by a thread and the universe is both beautiful and unforgiving. Now, take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let your body sink into comfort. Close your eyes and just listen to my voice. The impact was chaos, metal screaming, alarms blaring, gravity twisting. Jack Hale barely had time to register the world flipping around him before everything went dark. Then, silence. He woke to a dim, blood-orange sky. His visor cracked, and the heavy stillness of an alien world pressing down on him. His body ached, his thoughts sluggish. The last thing he remembered was turbulence, then freefall. His gloved fingers trembled as he pulled up his oxygen levels on his wrist display. 12 hours left. Jack sucked in a slow, measured breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He could already feel the tightness in his chest. The worst thing he could do right now was panic. Survey the damage. Find resources. Think. His wrecked ship, the Horizon, lay ahead, half buried in the black dust of the alien desert, steam and fire licking at its ruined hull. Beyond that, nothing but an endless, barren expanse. The wind carried an eerie whisper, shifting the dust in slow, restless swirls. Jack staggered forward, boots sinking into the loose ground. His leg throbbed. Not broken, but bruised deep. Every step sent a spike of pain through his body, but he kept moving. His radio crackled uselessly in his ear. No signal, no rescue. At least, not yet. Inside the shattered remains of the Horizon, Jack dug through the wreckage. The comms array was gone, torn clean off in the crash. Sparks fizzed from exposed wires. The emergency beacon was completely fried, and his supply inventory was a mess. Oxygen first. Ripping open a damaged storage panel, Jack let out a shaky exhale. 3 oxygen tanks, enough to stretch maybe 3 more days, if he was careful. Next, shelter. The Horizon's main cabin was ruined, but the cargo module was still intact. It wasn't much, just a thin-walled storage bay, but it was better than nothing. Jack worked through the growing ache in his muscles, dragging supplies inside, sealing off the worst of the cracks. It wouldn't hold against the elements forever, but for now it would have to do. When he finally sat down, exhaustion crashed over him. He stared at the data on his wrist display. Temperature, minus 22 degrees Celsius. Wind speed, 40 miles per hour. Oxygen, low. His hands curled into fists. This planet would kill him if he let it. Time blurred into survival. Jack's days became a pattern of scraping by, checking the oxygen reserves, patching cracks in the shelter, rationing food and water. The water situation was dire. The filtration system still worked, but without a natural source it wouldn't last. He walked the landscape, searching for anything. A river, ice, moisture, but the ground was dry, cracked, lifeless. The sky was heavy with distant storms, but they never reached the ground. He kept going. And then he found it. The moment his boots sank slightly into the ground, his breath caught. Moisture. Jack dropped to his knees, scooping up a handful of dark soil. It clung together, damp and heavy. Water was beneath the surface. A slow, disbelieving grin spread across his face. If there was water, there was a chance. hope turned to work. The Horizon had a small hydroponics unit, damaged but salvageable. Jack worked tirelessly to repair it, stripping down unnecessary components, rerouting power. Days passed. His body weakened, but the plants grew. Tiny green sprouts, delicate but stubborn, pushed through the soil. Jack watched them like a lifeline. Food. Survival. It was working. The days stretched. Jack kept moving, kept pushing forward. The silence became normal. He spoke to himself, to the plants, to the sky. Sometimes he let himself believe he wasn't alone. Then the radio crackled. Jack froze. Static buzzed, faint and broken. A voice. It was weak, but it was there. He lunged for the receiver, twisting the dial, adjusting the frequency. Hail. Read. This is Aurora 7. His heart slammed against his ribs. They heard him. They were coming. Jack exhaled, his entire body sagging with relief. He just had to stay alive long enough for them to get here. The days blurred together. Jack marked the passage of time by the slow, steady growth of his crops and the dwindling numbers on his oxygen gauge. Survival was a balancing act. Every breath, every movement, every calorie counted. He rationed supplies carefully, half a meal instead of a full one. Water intake just enough to keep him functioning. The hydroponics unit produced oxygen, but not fast enough. If rescue didn't arrive soon, he'd have to face the harsh truth. He was running out of air. The storms came without warning. One night, the winds howled louder than ever before, rattling the thin walls of his shelter. Jack woke to violent shaking, his makeshift roof groaning under the pressure. Then, a sharp crack. He barely had time to react before a section of the shelter collapsed inward, sending dust and debris flying. The oxygen tank he had been carefully preserving toppled, rolling out into the darkness. No, no, no. Jack threw himself after it, lungs burning as he stumbled out into the raging storm. The wind ripped at his suit, nearly knocking him off his feet. He spotted the tank rolling across the rocky ground already meters away. He sprinted. Every step was a battle against the storm. He lunged, fingers grazing the metal. Got it. But the storm had other plans. A gust of wind hit like a hammer, lifting Jack clean off his feet and hurling him backward. His body slammed into the ground, the oxygen tank flying from his grip. He lay there, gasping. The tank was gone. Panic clawed at his chest, but he forced it down. Breathe slow. Think. One tank lost. How much did he have left? He checked his display. 36 hours. Jack reinforced the shelter as best he could, working through the exhaustion. There was no time to stop. The plants had taken a hit. Some wilted from the sudden pressure drop, but they were still alive. His only hope was the signal. The radio transmission he'd picked up was his lifeline. Every day he tried again. Aurora 7. This is Jack Hale. I'm still here. The first few times, nothing. Then, a response. A female voice, calm but urgent. Hale, this is Mira Vasquez aboard Aurora 7. We've got you on our scope. We're coming. Jack nearly collapsed in relief. He had coordinates, a rescue plan. He just had to last long enough for them to reach him. The waiting was agony. His body grew weaker. his movements slower. He could feel the light-headed haze creeping in, the telltale sign of oxygen deprivation. Jack adjusted the flow, rationing what little he had left. Stretch it out, just a little longer. He stared up at the sky every night, watching for the faint glimmer of a ship coming to save him. Then, one night, a light appeared, faint, distant, but moving. His rescue was here. Jack let out a shaking breath, closing his eyes for just a moment. He had made it. Jack stood outside the shelter, gazing at the sky. A single distant light flickered in the darkness, moving ever so slightly against the vast backdrop of stars. It was them. His rescue. The sight filled him with relief so intense it nearly knocked him off his feet. They had found him. He activated his beacon, sending out the final distress signal. His oxygen levels were critically low, and his body felt like it was moving through sand. But none of that mattered. They were coming. Just hold on. The ship descended through the atmosphere, its hull glowing against the planet's twilight. Jack's earpiece crackled. "Hail, we're preparing for landing. Stand by." Mira's voice. Steady. Focused. Jack exhaled, his lungs burning. 30 minutes, maybe less. That's all he needed to survive. He braced against the weak wind, staring up at the descending rescue craft. The ship tilted slightly, then shuddered. Jack frowned. Something was wrong. His earpiece exploded with static. "Hail! Engine! Fail!" A deafening roar filled the sky as the ship lurched violently, spinning out of control. Jack's heart slammed into his ribs. No. 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 The ship veered sideways, plummeting far from his position. Then, a blinding explosion. The sky lit up as debris rained down over the horizon. Jack staggered, gasping. The ship had crashed. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. His rescue was gone. No, there had to be survivors. With the last of his energy, Jack grabbed his gear and started walking. His legs trembled. His oxygen alarm blared, but he pushed forward. Because somewhere out there, someone was still alive. After what felt like an eternity, he found the wreckage. Flames flickered in the dark, illuminating the twisted remains of what had been his rescue. Jack's body screamed for rest, but he forced himself to move, and then a voice, weak, gasping. "Hail!" He turned. Mira. She was slumped against a piece of the ship, her suit torn, her face streaked with blood. Jack rushed to her. She looked up, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "They're gone," she whispered. Jack didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. The only survivor was her. They sat together, silent. The night stretched endlessly around them. 2 people, 1 dead mission. Jack leaned his head back, staring at the stars. No one else was coming. Mira turned to him, voice barely above a breath. "What do we do now?" Jack closed his eyes. Then, with the last of his strength, he whispered, "We survived."